Hello, my name is Dr. Eric Loris Phillips. I'm the FCPS Acting Executive Director of Public Affairs. I'm honored to be with you as we kick off the new school year. As excited as parents and students are, and staff, to have our students back in our buildings and in our schools, we are still navigating through a pandemic. Part of our current reality is responding when students and staff test positive for COVID-19. Today, we want to share with the community more details about how this process works. FCPS will continue to provide and update resources for our community. For some, the best way to receive information is through a conversation. So today, joining us are Mr. Dana Falls, Director of Student Services, and Ms. Kristen Canning, School Administration and Instructional Leadership Director for Elementary Schools. Kristen, Dana, welcome.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here today. So far, I've heard parents have been supportive and appreciative when principals reach out about a child being in close contact with someone who has tested positive for COVID-19. But understandably, they have a lot of questions. So Mr. Falls, I wonder if you could help our community understand, what does it mean to be in close contact?
Yes, that's a great question because many individuals are confused about close contact in school versus in the community. And so it has been determined that within schools, the guidance, when we have mitigating strategies in place, like wearing a mask, students who are within 3 feet of one another are considered a close contact if they're in that proximity for 15 minutes or more. And that's 15 minutes or more duration throughout the day, not at a time. With adults, that is 6 feet. And so there are situations where students are not wearing a mask, such as when they're eating lunch. And so then we default to a 6-foot guidance for students in close contact. So there are factors that vary depending on the activities throughout the day, but in a nutshell, that's the guidance for close contact.
Thank you. And so we're really just focused in on contact within our schools or FCPS facilities.
Yes, that's correct. We do case studies to try to determine whether or not somebody was in close contact, and then we consult with the health department contact tracers.
Thank you. So once I'm identified by school staff, Ms. Canning, what should I expect as a parent?
Sure. So if your child is identified as a close contact, then you would receive a phone call from school staff, typically the administration, but it could be a health room staff member at the school. They would inform you that your child had been identified as having close contact with a positive COVID person, and they would also provide you some context to the situation as well as some guidelines for next steps.
So you just mentioned guidelines. What are some of those guidelines for quarantining?
Sure. So for individuals who are vaccinated and not exhibiting any symptoms, there's no quarantine needed. So in that case, you could be a close contact and not have to quarantine. However, if an individual is not vaccinated, then the quarantine is a 10-day quarantine outside of school. There's a possibility of shortening that quarantine by a little bit if a family chooses to have their child tested on day 5 of their quarantine. They can then come back with a negative result on day 8. So that scenario is dependent upon, of course, the individual remaining without symptoms. So if a student has symptoms or a staff member has symptoms, they would be out of school for the full 10-day quarantine.
One of the things that we know is that parents could be frustrated or question when they hear the news about a quarantine. What does that mean? Mr. Falls, can you talk a little bit about this guidance on what happens when a child has been quarantined?
Yes, excuse me, the Maryland Department of Health really outlines, in alignment with the Center for Disease Control, the guidance on quarantine. And as Kristen just said, there are other factors that make the situation seem more gray for individuals. And so it can be very frustrating to parents because they believe they're sending their child to school and their child will be safe. And yet we have to exercise caution, and we follow the guidance of the Maryland Department of Health, along with our local health department officials. So we are always in consultation with them on decisions about whether or not a student needs to quarantine. And I might add, there are factors that are unique to specific students or specific situations. So if a student, for instance, has a condition where they cannot wear a mask, that quarantine could be extended to 14 days. And that's all under the guidance of the Maryland Department of Health and our local health department officials.
Okay. So we know it's important to be transparent and making sure that we're clearly communicating information to families and to our community. What are some communication methods in place outside of school-based contact when these situations arise?
So I can help you with that. So we mentioned the personal contact from the health room or the administration if your child is a close contact. That's our first step. And our schools are working very hard to make that a very timely process so that they can reach families quickly when they need to and share information. Additionally, if your child is in the classroom where a student has tested positive for COVID, but they're not a close contact, that whole class receives a letter no matter what. So if your son or daughter is in a second grade classroom, somebody's tested positive for COVID, the contact tracing has already happened. You didn't receive a call about that because your child wasn't a close contact, but for the issue of transparency, it's important to us that we share that with our families. So those families receive a letter from the school sharing that information. In addition to that, if a school meets the criteria for what is defined as an outbreak, and again, that's defined by the Maryland Department of Health, and it's important to understand that an outbreak is defined as 2 linked cases within a cohort or classroom. So when you think about students sharing spaces in school, we think about the classroom, maybe the school bus. And so if 2 students are test positive who share a cohort space, that does meet the definition for the Maryland Department of Health as an outbreak. When that happens, communication goes to the whole school community. And again, we're confident in our safety protocols, we're confident in the mitigation strategies that we have, but we're very committed to being open, transparent, and sharing information with families when we have it.
Thank you. So just to clarify, a cohort could be considered a group of students riding the bus together.
Absolutely.
That's a cohort of students.
Yep, and I should add that the 2 linked cases would have to be cases that are not within the same household. So if on the same bus, a brother and sister tested positive, that would not meet the definition for an outbreak. It would be 2 cases linked in a cohort, not from the same household.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
It sounds like we have a variety of ways that we're sharing information with parents. That's great to hear, and not surprising. Ms. Canning, I know another concern is the support we can offer to students who are impacted by quarantine. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'd love to talk a little bit about that because we recognize that that's very important to our families and it's really very important to all of us. You know, we don't want students checked out for 10 days and at home. So we're working hard to make certain that we're responsive to student needs. First and foremost, all of our students have access to Schoology. So when a student goes on a quarantine, if they need a device from school, that's provided for that student so that throughout that 10-day quarantine, the student can access Schoology. Teachers are posting on Schoology assignments, work that is connected to what's happening in the school building. And so for many students, that's what they're accessing. You know, it differs based upon lots of factors, one being the age and level of the student. We have our high school students who are feeling like that Schoology support is pretty adequate. So when offered additional support like virtual tutoring, virtual check-ins, most of our high schoolers are saying, no, I think I'm good with I can keep up with Schoology. Our middle school students, however, have been more responsive to picking up on that virtual support. So if given an opportunity to check in with a teacher, a specialist to ask questions about your work or to receive some additional support, we're seeing some of our middle schoolers take advantage of that support. And then our elementary school students, we know, are our youngest students, ones who naturally require perhaps a higher level of support. And so that looks different depending upon the makeup, the staff and resources in that school. And so in some cases, it could be that a literacy or math specialist is setting up a time during the day to check in with students who are working, or we do have the opportunity with staff availability to pay staff to tutor outside of school. So we are committed to using all of the resources at our disposal to provide responsive and appropriate support to students, and that's an ever-evolving situation.
Thank you. One of our most valuable resources is our teachers. Our instructional staff is phenomenal. So there are various ways that our teachers are supporting students who find themselves in a quarantine situation. Our families, are they able to reach out? This may be we know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you
Sure.
anyway. Can our parents and families reach out to our teachers to ask for additional support if they don't feel that that support is being given the way that they need for their child?
Sure. No, I will take any opportunity to praise our teaching staff, and I agree with you, they're doing a phenomenal job. So we encourage families through Schoology, because that's our common platform where all of our students are accessing, to reach out to teachers if they're feeling that their students maybe aren't accessing the work, or they're struggling with the work, or they're having trouble locating excuse me, where that work is. So our teachers feel very strongly their students are their students. They are their students when they're sitting in front of them in the classroom, and they are their students when they're learning from home. And so I'm confident that teachers would be as responsive to those parents as any others to make certain that they were doing whatever was in their control to provide for students the highest level of service they can when their students aren't with them.
Yeah, and would you mind just talking a little bit about how our school administrators have had conversations and prepared staff for these moments when students may not be in their classroom?
Sure. So again, I think flexibility and some autonomy are both very important things in terms of expectations really are that teachers are providing support through assignments or instructional support for students with videos, online opportunities. We have Lexia as a platform in our system to support reading. We have iReady as a platform in our system to support math. So the administration is sharing with teachers, put things up on Schoology that your students can be as independent as can be expected on. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the exact lesson that's happening in the classroom, because that's often difficult to translate into an online platform, but it should be the same content. So if you're learning about short vowels in a first grade classroom, let's put up on Schoology some interactive games or some connections to Lexia that are opportunities for students at home to practice short vowels.
Thank you. Not surprising to hear that our P through 12 staff have had these conversations in preparation for students returning to school. Ms. Canning, Mr. Falls, thank you so much for sharing this information with us today. Before we close out, are there any thoughts or remarks that you'd like to share?
If I could, I would like to thank our parents for partnering with us. This is a difficult time, and it's difficult for students as they've returned, some who haven't been physically in school for a long time, others who are kind of readjusting to the school life, because last year wasn't a normal school year. And I think our parents have done an exceptional job of really partnering with us. I understand the frustrations that they feel when they're notified, for instance, that their child has to quarantine. We're exercising the caution that we're advised through our medical community to be sure that we provide the safest and best education for our students. And I think it's important that we all continue to partner together. And my conversations with parents, while they may be frustrated at times because of the sudden change in their schedule and trying to figure out how they're going to care for their child and work at the same time, and it's challenging and it's difficult, but they've really partnered well with us, and I think I want to take the opportunity to say thank you to them.
Thank you for lifting up our family community. We are very fortunate to live in a phenomenal community, and that partnership is key, so thank you for stating that.
Sure, and I would echo Dana's thoughts about this truly being a partnership. You know, we all have the same goal. We want our children in school, we want them safe, and we want everybody to feel cared for and well taken care of. And so I too would like to just appreciate the fact that we really have been met with understanding and support, and I think that's going to be important continuing on. I'd also like to say that I'm fortunate enough to be able to be in our schools and have opportunities to walk the halls and be in the classrooms and talk with our administrators, and it feels great. It feels great to have kids back. Kids feel good about being back. They are, you can tell that they feel like they're back again, they're home again. You know, this is what they've missed. And so, you know, the effort is well worth the reward that we have of having our children back in school. So we ask our parents to continue partnering with us by staying on top of COVID-like illness symptoms. You know, it can be difficult when your child wakes up with a, you know, an upset stomach or a headache or a sore throat. But the more we work together to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 and to keep everybody safe, the higher the chances that everybody does better. So
Do better together.
do better together.
Thank you. We are committed to keeping families updated. FCPS.org is your one-stop shop for all information important for staff, students, and families. Also, the weekly Superintendent's Update e-newsletter will keep families updated on the latest information in our community. You could also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please reach out to us with any questions or concerns that you may have. That's why we're here. And in the end, we want all of you to be well. Take care, everyone.